Shall we begin? So we're on page 675 at the bottom line. Things fashioned were the imaged homes where mind arrived. But just before I read, I want to mention that on page 672, Savitri was able to see the 7 immortal earths. And a little further down the page he says, even the lowest of these earths was still a heaven. And so what we've been reading up to now was about the lowest of these earths. And we just have a few more lines to read about that, and then she will move up to a next higher level. Things fashioned were the imaged homes where mind arrived to fathom a deep physical joy. The heart was a torch lit from infinity. The limbs were trembling densities of soul. These were the first domains, the outer courts, immense but least in range and least in price, the slightest ecstasies of the undying gods. Higher her swing of vision swept, and new, admitted through large sapphire opening gates into the wideness of a light beyond. These were but sumptuously decorated doors to worlds nobler, more felicitously fair. Endless aspired the climbing of those heavens. Realm upon realm received her soaring view. Then, on what seemed one crown of the ascent, where finite and the infinite are one, immune she beheld the strong immortals' seats, who live for a celestial joy and rule the middle regions of the unfading ray. Great forms of deities sat in deathless tears. Eyes of an unborn gaze towards her leaned through a transparency of crystal fire. In the beauty of bodies wrought from rapture's lines, shapes of entrancing sweetness, spilling bliss, feet glimmering upon the sunstone courts of mind, heaven's cup-bearers bore round the Eternal's wine. A tangle of bright bodies, of moved souls, tracing the close and intertwined delight, the harmonious tread of lives forever joined in the passionate oneness of a mystic joy, as if sunbeams made living and divine, the golden-bosomed Apsara goddesses, in groves flooded from an argent disk of bliss that floated through a luminous sapphire dream, in a cloud of raiment lit with golden limbs and gleaming footfalls treading fairy swords, virgin motions of bacchant innocences who know their riot for a dance of God, whirled, linked in moonlit revels of the heart. Impeccable artists of unerring forms, magician builders of sound and rhythmic words, wind-haired Gandharvas chanted to the ear the odes that shape the universal thought, the lines that tear the veil from deity's face, the rhythms that bring the sounds of wisdom's sea. So last week we were reading about the lowest of the 7 immortal earths. This week we have just a few lines to read to finish that section, and then Savitri moves up to a higher realm, the middle realm of the middle regions of the unfading ray. You will begin, Rosa? Yes. All right. Here, rapture.
Rapture was a common incident. The long lines of whose capture the thrill. Our human pleasure is a falling thread. The lake symbol shapes a careless ornament sewn on the ridge in the
brocade
of Godhead dress.
Yes, so this is quite a sentence. The lovelinesses, all the different kinds of beauty. No, before that there's this line about rapture. Rapture is intense delight. It's delight that carries you out of yourself into self-forgetfulness. Rapture. You forget all about yourself because you're in such a state of bliss. So in this world, rapture was a common incident. It was happening all the time to different beings there. And the lovelinesses, the many different kinds of beauty, of whose captured thrill our human pleasure is a fallen thread. Those many different kinds of beauty are there in symbol shapes, as if they are embroidered on the dress which the divine being is wearing. So let's look at it in more detail. Those beauties, the delight that they give, the captured thrill, the thrill of seeing and experiencing those lovelinesses. Our human pleasure is just like one fallen thread from those lovelinesses, which there are lying like symbol shapes. There they are considered just as a careless ornament which has been sewn onto the rich brocade of Godhead's dress. So there the divine being is wearing a beautiful dress made of brocade. Does anybody know what brocade is? Yes, you will know, Narendra. Tell us exactly what is brocade.
It's a beautiful, very elaborate fabric, richly decorated.
Made of silk. Should be made of silk.
Yes.
Interwoven with other beautiful threads.
Yes, many threads, and my main thing is richness and beauty and intricate design. Very complicated designs.
Complicated patterns, but they are woven in. Here he says embroidered, so into the brocade is already woven all kinds of elaborate patterns, no? But an additional ornament is embroidered. When we have decorated beautiful silk threads, we can do embroidery, no? We make designs. So onto that brocade, that richly patterned, beautifully woven fabric, which is dressing and honoring the Godhead in that world, there are additional beauties added, embroidered on. And they are so beautiful, but the delight that they give, just a tiny thread of it, such one fine thread, falls down to us, and that gives us pleasure, our human pleasure. Is it clear? Would you read, please? I'm sorry, again, I've forgotten your name. Please remind me. Ravindra. Thank you. Yes.
Things fashioned were the image, modes, and wine, arrived to fathom a deep physical joy. The heart was a torch lit from infinity. The limbs were trembling densities of soul.
Yes. Things fashioned. It means things that have been made. A cup or a vase or a table, any of these beautiful things that are the products of craftsmanship, of skill. He says in that world they were like homes or images of homes where the mind could arrive and dwell, stay there for some time to enjoy the depths of a deep physical joy just by contemplating those beautiful things that were made. It reminds me of something that Aurobindo has written in his book Foundations of Indian Culture, in the section on art, about the craftsmanship of ancient India. Craft is what is made, things fashioned are often considered to be inferior to art as such, painting or music or poetry. But he says those objects that were made by the ancient craftsmen were made in the same consciousness, that they are made as habitations for the divine, and they are meant to express the divine presence in their lines. So that is the mind. It can enjoy those things. There, the heart burns and blazes like a torch that's been lit from infinity. There's no end to the delights of the heart. And the limbs, the parts of the body, were trembling densities of soul. Soul packed to be dense enough to be a durable body, but trembling with delight. Martin.
These were the first domains, the outer force, immense, but least in range and least in price, the slightest ecstasies of the undying God.
So this is the lowest of the earths, and all these beautiful things that she's experiencing, these are just the first entrance, the outer courtyards, before you actually enter into the palace. They are already immense in themselves, but the ones that are further on will be even more immense. These are the least in range, the least in size and scope, and the least in price, in value. These are the slightest ecstasies, the least intense, the faintest ecstasies of the undying gods. Nana Lakshmi.
Kayak and swing of vision, swept and new, admitted through large sapphire bordering gates, into the wideness of a light beyond. These were sumptuous, decorated doors to worlds nobler, more felicitously fair.
So when Savitri looks up higher, it's as if the skies open up for her. She's allowed, or her sight is allowed, to pass through large sapphire opening gates. We had this word sapphire before. It's the color of that beautiful blue gemstone, and a very beautiful blue for the sky. So it's as if the skies open up, her sight is allowed to pass through into the wideness of a light beyond. These were but sumptuous decorated doors to worlds nobler, more felicitously fair. Sumptuous means again richly decorated, and the worlds beyond are nobler and even more blissfully beautiful than the ones she's in now. Narendra, you will read.
Endless aspired the climbing of those heavens, realm upon realm received her soaring view. Then on what seemed one crown of the ascent, where finite and infinite are one, immune she held the strong immortal seats, who live for a celestial joy and rule, the middle regions of the unfading ray.
Yes. So when she looks up, she sees those nobler, even more beautiful worlds, And they go on and on and on, rising up, aspiring, rising up. Her view also, her power of vision also soars up like a bird, and she can enter one realm and another and another and another, realm upon realm. But then it's as if she reaches a certain crown, a certain level. The ascent goes on further, but she reaches some plateau or a certain kind of summit. And that's a place where the finite and the infinite get joined. They become one. And she sees the seats, the thrones, the places of those strong, immortal beings who live for a heavenly joy and a heavenly rule. They have a certain role to play in the control. Though that summit seems to, or these seats are the middle regions, not the highest. She's moving up from the lowest. These are the middle regions. The ascent goes further on. Of the unfading ray, we are in the world of everlasting day. So the light doesn't change. It goes on pouring down wherever you are. It doesn't fade. Anandi?
Great forms of the size sat in their flesh tubes, eyes of an unborn gaze towards the land, through transparency of crystal fire.
Let's pause there. So she sees great forms of deities, of gods, and they are arranged in hierarchies, in tiers. Our amphitheatre at the back there, it has several tiers, different rows of seats going higher and higher and higher. So that's how they are arranged. There are lower ones and higher ones and higher ones and higher ones. And those immortal beings look down on her. Their eyes of an unborn gaze, they lean towards Savitri through this atmosphere, a transparency of crystal fire. When he uses the word fire, we think of the intensity and passion of the heart. But this is also transparent, absolutely pure, like crystal, this atmosphere. And yes, it's full of energy and passion. Would you read, Janaka?
In the beauty of bodies wrought from rapturous lines, shades of pentencing of sweetness spilling bliss, feet glimmering upon the sunstone court of mine, demons,
Bearers.
cupbearers, bore round the eternal's wine.
Yes. So that the gods are sitting there in their hierarchy, and somebody is serving them the wine of delight. So naturally, their servants are very, very beautiful beings. Those cup-bearers of the gods. Their bodies have been shaped from the lines of rapture, of intense delight. They are themselves shapes of entrancing sweetness, and the bliss is overflowing out of them. They are spilling bliss as they move, and their feet glimmer, they shine with light as they move around on these courts, on these courtyards, these floors, which are made of sunstone. I don't know what sunstone is, but it must glow with a golden light like the sun. They are heaven's cup-bearers, and they are sharing the Soma, the Eternal's wine of delight. And then there's this long sentence about the Apsaras. Would you read, Sergei?
A tangle of bright bodies, and moved souls tracing the glows of intertwined delight, the harmonious strength lies forever joined, in the passionate oneness of a mystic joy, as if sunbeams made living and divine, the golden bosomed Apsara goddesses, in groves flooded from an argent disk of bliss, that flowed through a luminous sapphire wind, in a cloud of rainbow gleam with golden wings, and gleaming footfalls threading fairies' walls, virgin motions of beckoned innocences, who know they arrive for a dance of God, while gleam emollient radiance on the heart.
So it's a long, complicated sentence. The first 4 lines, or 5 lines, describe the golden-bosomed Apsara goddesses, who are dancers. And they are the subject of the sentence, and then what they do is the last line of the sentence. They are whirling, linked. They are dancing around, holding hands or entwining arms, and they are dancing these moonlit revels of the heart. So they are dancing in moonlight. They are celebrating, and these are the beautiful movements of the heart. So what do they look like? If you watch them, it looks like a tangle of bright bodies. A tangle is when something's all mixed up, tied together. And these bright bodies are at the same time souls. They are moved souls. And it's because of the way that their souls are moved, the way that their souls are feeling, that accordingly they dance. And what they are doing are tracing the close and intertwined delight, the harmonious thread of lives forever joined in the passionate oneness of a mystic joy. What they are expressing is oneness, the joy of oneness. And they are expressing that in this dance, which is about being intertwined. There are some dances that we know that are like that, where you have a long line of people. They're all linked together, holding hands or linked in some way. And as they move around, some will raise their arms and others will pass through, They will, and then pass back again. So the line is always twining, always connected. It's expressing this connectedness. No? And this is expressing the connectedness of their lives. That is, they're expressing the life that they are living, a life of oneness in which everything is interconnected in a harmonious way. All this is being expressed in a beautiful dance. And these golden bosomed Apsara goddesses, they look like sunbeams, sunbeams made living and divine. They are so golden, so beautiful, that they are actually living forms. And where are they dancing? In groves, in the forest. It also recalls Krishna's Ras Leela, no? Where where they dance in the moonlight. So here, these are groves that are being flooded with light from a silver disc which expresses bliss. If I'm not wrong, I think that the Vedic god of Soma, the god of bliss, is connected with the moon. No? So here it's the moon is spreading its bliss. And that argent disc of bliss is floating as the moon floats through a luminous sapphire dream. That sky, it's not a dark, dark blue, it's a brighter blue, a sapphire blue. And they are wearing clothes, raiment, which cover them like clouds, cloudy floating raiment. But through that cloudy floating raiment, their beautiful golden limbs shine through like lights. In a cloud of raiment lit with golden limbs. And their footfalls, their footsteps also are full of light, gleaming, and they are treading on fairy swords. Sword is a beautiful lawn, beautiful, soft, smooth grass. And he's again here used this word fairy, which means magical. When he uses this particular spelling instead of the more ordinary one, it has a special significance of magic. So these Apsara goddesses, their movements are pure, virgin motions of bacchant innocences. The Bacchants are the worshippers of Dionysus, the god of wine, the god of divine intoxication. But here he's saying all this is so pure. They are dancing like Bacchants, wildly or vigorously, perhaps passionately, but it's all absolutely innocent because they know that their revelry, all this intoxicated dancing that they are doing, is a play, a dance of God. God himself, the divine, is moving in them. So it's absolutely pure, their dance, as they whirled, linked in moonlit revels of the heart. Their hearts also are reveling. So we had the cup-bearers, and we have the dancers, the beautiful apsaras, and now the musicians, they come next. Ganga Lakshmi, would you read?
Yeah. And become artists of unknown forms, magician builders of sound and rhythmic words. green hair, Gandhara chanted to the ear. The odes that shade the universal tone, the lines that tear the veil from deity face, the rhythm that brings the sound of wisdom's sea.
Yes. So the Gandharvas, they are musicians and poets and singers. So here he describes them impeccable, faultless artists. And the forms that they create are unerring. They're also faultless and perfect. These artists are builders, magical builders who use sound and rhythmic words. Poetry should be rhythmic and musical. So these are the Gandharvas. They are often imaged floating in the sky, flying, not with wings, but just floating. So he says wind-haired. It's as if their hair is floating in the wind. They are chanting to the ear. We can hear them. They are chanting odes. Odes are celebratory poems. He says these are the odes that give shape to the universal thought, the thought that has created the universe. They are chanting lines that tear the veil from deity's face. They reveal the divinity. And they are chanting with rhythms, wonderful, powerful rhythms that bring the sounds of wisdom's sea, like the waves of a great ocean. Joel.
Immortal figures and illumined brows, our great forefathers in those splendors moon, termless in power and satisfied of light, they enjoyed the sense of all for which we strive.
So in that heavens, in those heavens, our great forefathers are living there, moving there. In the Vedas, they often speak about these forefathers, the ones who went before, who have started all this great tradition of spiritual knowledge. So they are living there, these early founders of humanity are living and moving there. They are immortal now. Their brows are full of light, illumined. Now they are termless in power. They have unlimited power. And they are satisfied of light. They have enough light. They are enjoying the sense, maybe here it means even essence, of everything that we are laboring so hard to grasp and to bring about, the sense of everything that we strive and struggle for. They have achieved it and are enjoying it. Slava, would you read?
Seers, no poets, soul, the eternal soul that travels from high paradise to earth, informed by our search, tracked by pursuing mind, like both disfigured by the pains of birth, sight, greed, wrong, which now are great sounds of by difficult ritual on immortal and
Yes. So these are the great seers and poets, high seers, moved poets. And there they can clearly see those eternal thoughts that are coming from the even higher levels. Those...
Moved poets, they moved up.
No, I think it is that they are moved. They get moved by these thoughts that come to them. And because they are emotionally moved by those thoughts, they can put them into beautiful words. Poets should be moved, actually. And they should be seers. They should have a power of vision. You can't just manufacture poetry in your mind, although today many people try to do that. No. But it should come out of some... the poet Wordsworth said, emotion recollected in tranquility. That's the way he worked. That is that he would have an amazing experience as he was moving through nature, particularly that's what moved him. And then remembering that after some time, then he'd be that emotion, he would be able to recapture it and put it into poetry. It's not the way all poets work, but that's what he said. So their poetry, these rishis and poets, has come to them. They have received it, seen it, these eternal thoughts that are coming to them, travelers from on high. And the same thoughts arrive also to us human beings. But by the time they reach us, they've got spoiled, they've got deformed, twisted, no? By our search, our eagerness to get hold of them. And they've got tricked by the costuming mind. Tricked normally means to be misled. Somebody misleads you. But here it's in another sense, which means dressed up, ornamented. You can be tricked out in jewelry. So the mind clothes those eternal thoughts. It puts costumes on them, the human mind. And so those poor deformed thoughts, all dressed up like that, they appear to us like gods, immortal beings, but disfigured. Their whole appearance has been spoiled by the pangs of birth as they've been born into our world in the form of human speech. But there, those seers and poets can seize the great words which for us will come to us only as frail sounds, very weak sounds that our poets catch in human language, on a mortal tongue, with difficult rapture. It's so difficult for our poets to catch those great words. It's interesting that Sri Aurobindo says this. Nirodbaran has told us that when Sri Aurobindo was composing this long canto, he didn't seem to have any difficulties at all. That he was dictating and dictating and dictating. He would dictate 500 lines at a stretch, and the next day Nirod would come and he'd give another 500 lines. So, but perhaps in other parts of the poem he had to go through difficult rapture to share with us what he had to say.
Why it's a difficult rapture?
Sorry?
Difficult rapture.
Yes, that's what he's saying. Our human poets, they can't really be poets. They can't give us true poetry unless they've been seized with rapture somehow. But it is difficult for them to express what they have seized. But those on that high plane, in that heaven, those high seers and moved poets, they could easily seize those thoughts and express them in great words. But for our poets, it's much more difficult because it has to pass through the human mind, and there it gets distorted, and it can't be expressed in human speech properly. But Aurobindo is doing completely new things here with human speech. I mentioned it last time, that I don't think there's ever been any poetry like this before in the English language or in any other language. What he's doing here with the language is just amazing. And that makes it very difficult for me to share anything with you of the limited amount that I myself can seize from these extraordinary lines. So I think we will.
But it's fantastic, Shraddhavan, that when your consciousness changes, you understand much more and much more and much. Never stop. I think for that.
Yes.
Savitri never stopped.
Yes. That's what I think. That's what I always say. That it is said of the Mahabharata, that it is an ocean of gems. It's a vast, limitless ocean which is full of treasures. And in the same way, I feel that Savitri is like that. And that, as Gangalakshmi says, as we develop in consciousness, we'll dive again and again and again into this poem, and we will always be able to come up with new treasures, surprising treasures.
Divine said yesterday, I don't know, I understand, but it's incredible. I read this morning and it's incredible.
That's another thing about the Life Divine. It's such a big fat book, but in every paragraph he tells us something fresh and new.
Today is incredible.
The next poet, according to you, for Hindu is Homer? Or who would you?
I would not be able to. Sri Aurobindo himself made some classification. He didn't include himself. He looked at the past poets. And he put, I think, Valmiki right up at the top.
Other Indians?
Well, of course, there's Homer and Dante, he mentioned. Yes. And Shakespeare, of course, he admired very, very much. Very, very much. Yes. He's written about Shakespeare quite a lot.
Here rapture was a common incident, the lovelinesses of whose captured thrill our human pleasure is a fallen thread, lay symbol shapes, a careless ornament sewn on the rich brocade of Godhead's dress. Things fashioned were the imaged homes where mind arrived to fathom a deep physical joy. The heart was a torch lit from infinity. The limbs were trembling densities of soul. These were the first domains, the outer courts, immense but least in range and least in price, the slightest ecstasies of the undying gods. Higher her swing of vision swept, and new, admitted through large sapphire opening gates into the wideness of a light beyond. These were but sumptuous decorated doors to worlds nobler, more felicitously fair. Endless aspired the climbing of those heavens. Realm upon realm received her soaring view. Then, on what seemed one crown of the ascent, where finite and the infinite are one, immune she beheld the strong immortals' seats, who live for a celestial joy and rule. The middle regions of the unfading ray. Great forms of deities sat in deathless tears. Eyes of an unborn gaze towards her leaned through a transparency of crystal fire. In the beauty of bodies wrought from rapture's lines, shapes of entrancing sweetness spilling bliss, feet glimmering upon the sunstone courts of mind, heaven's cup-bearers bore round the Eternal's wine. A tangle of bright bodies, of moved souls, tracing the close and intertwined delight, the harmonious tread of lives forever joined in the passionate oneness of a mystic joy, as if sunbeams made living and divine, the golden-bosomed Apsara goddesses, in groves flooded from an argent disk of bliss that floated through a luminous sapphire dream, in a cloud of raiment lit with golden limbs, and gleaming footfalls treading fairy swards, virgin motions of bacchant innocences who know their riot for a dance of God, whirled, linked in moonlit revels of the heart. Impeccable artists of unerring forms, magician builders of sound and rhythmic words. Wind-haired Gandharvas chanted to the ear the odes that shape the universal thought, the lines that tear the veil from deity's face, the rhythms that bring the sounds of wisdom's sea. Immortal figures and illumined brows, our great forefathers in those splendors moved. Termless in power and satisfied of light, they enjoyed the sense of all for which we strive. High seers, moved poets, saw the eternal thoughts that travellers from on high arrive to us, deformed by our search, tricked by costuming mind, like gods disfigured by the pangs of birth. Ceased the great words, which now are frail sounds caught by difficult rapture on a mortal tongue.